A convoy of fuel tankers rolled toward Crimea near Primorsk, escorted by trucks mounted with machine guns, moving like every other supply run had for months. Ukrainian drones had already been watching long enough to know exactly which truck to hit first. Not the lead vehicle, the last one. And the choice of which truck died first was the whole plan. Tonight's story is about a Russian survival tactic that's gotten so elaborate it now involves painting fuel trucks to look like they're delivering milk, and about the exact moment that tactic stops working anyway. Welcome back. Let's start with the convoy itself, because the sequence of the strike tells you almost everything about how this war's logistics fight is actually fought now. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones spotted the convoy near Primorsk in Russian-held Zaporizhia. Fuel tankers moving toward Crimea, with military trucks running escort, mounted machine guns doubling as mobile air defense against exactly this kind of attack. Operators struck the rear tanker first. The explosion was powerful enough to take the escort vehicle behind it down as well. One hit clearing 2 targets. Only then did strike drones move to the front of the column, closing the trap from both ends and leaving the road and its shoulders lined with burning wreckage. Reconnaissance and strike footage together confirmed the convoy was systematically destroyed. Not a lucky hit on one truck, a worked sequence against the entire formation. Starting from the rear rather than the front meant the lead vehicles had no warning to scatter until the drones were already among them, which is the same basic ambush logic that governs how a predator picks off a herd, rather than charging straight into the middle of it. That single convoy is one data point inside a much larger, fast-moving pattern that has been building for months across the entire southern front. Geolocated footage alone confirmed 656 Russian trucks, fuel tankers, and other transport assets destroyed across Russian-held territory in July, up from 586 in June. And that's the floor, not the ceiling. Wrecked vehicles in areas without persistent surveillance are never filmed at all. Some confirmed strikes get withheld from publication, specifically so they don't tip off Russian commanders to methods still being used on the next convoy. The real number of successful hits sits somewhere above 656 quietly. Here's where it gets genuinely strange, because Ukraine had actually planned to double June's number outright, and didn't quite get there. Not because Russian defenses got stronger, because Russia got stranger. The first shift was simple: less traffic. Russian commanders started routing fewer vehicles down the highways getting hit hardest, which mechanically shrinks the number of targets available on any given night, regardless of how effective Ukrainian strikes are. Fewer trucks on the road is not the same as safer trucks on the road, but it does produce a smaller number on a chart. The second shift is the one worth sitting with. Russian logistics units began disguising military vehicles as civilian transport, repainting trucks in commercial colors, fitting fake covers over fuel tankers to make them look like ordinary cargo trailers. In some documented cases, building false superstructures over tankers entirely. Reports from partisan monitoring groups inside occupied territory described a specific, almost absurd extreme: fuel being moved in vehicles disguised to resemble milk and water tankers alongside old civilian license plates fitted onto military trucks. Some units went further still, according to Ukrainian military intelligence, moving smaller quantities of fuel, ammunition, and food using ordinary civilian cars, quad bikes, and even motorcycles, with supplies hidden inside camouflage dugouts, abandoned farm buildings, and repurposed agricultural facilities along the route. Ukrainian operators now have to spend more time confirming a target is genuinely military before striking, which occasionally means a real military vehicle slips through simply because it looked convincing enough to hesitate over. The third shift was armed escort. High-value fuel convoys increasingly moved with machine gun trucks, short-range air defense vehicles, and rapid response teams staged along the highway itself. These convoys now also depart with full tanks and larger onboard fuel reserves, specifically so they never have to stop at an exposed filling station along the route, removing one of the more predictable, catchable moments in the old supply pattern. All 3 adaptations worked, to a point. Some drones got intercepted, some trucks made it through that wouldn't have a few months earlier. Russia's own commanders had genuine reason to think they'd found a workable answer. Except the answer created a new problem, and it's the kind of problem that undoes the entire point of disguising a convoy in the first place. Ordinary commercial traffic does not travel with an armed escort. The moment Russia started attaching machine gun trucks and air defense vehicles to a convoy, it stopped mattering whether the fuel tanker itself was painted to look like a milk truck. The escort around it was doing the one thing camouflage is supposed to prevent, announcing from a distance that whatever's in the middle of that formation is worth protecting. Instead of hiding the convoy, the disguise plus the escort together made it easier to prioritize. Ukrainian operators didn't have to guess which vehicles in a mixed convoy were fuel tankers and which were decoys. They just had to find the guns. A milk truck alone might pass a quick glance from an operator working through dozens of contacts in a night. A milk truck traveling in formation with a pickup-mounted machine gun never does. That's exactly what happened at Primorsk. The escort truck went down in the same blast as the tanker behind it. Not a separate target requiring a separate pass, but proof that the protection itself had become part of the same kill zone it was meant to prevent. Ukraine's response to the disguise tactic specifically was to remove the ambiguity Russia had tried to create. Unmanned Systems Forces Commander Robert Madyar stated that any Russian truck moving along the southern military supply highways would now be treated as a potential military target. A direct response to Russia erasing its own distinction between civilian and military transport by disguising one as the other. When a country stops marking its own military logistics clearly, the burden of proof doesn't disappear. It just shifts onto every vehicle on that specific road, which is precisely the outcome Russia's camouflage program was trying to avoid in the first place. None of this means Russia's southern supply network collapses overnight, or that camouflage and escort tactics stop working entirely. Some trucks are still getting through. That's precisely how June's numbers grew into July's rather than staying flat. But look at what each Russian countermeasure actually cost. Reducing traffic to limit exposure also limits how much fuel and ammunition physically reaches the front. Disguising trucks as civilian vehicles slows down every delivery, since disguised convoys still have to avoid drawing suspicion, the way marked military transport never had to bother with. And escorting convoys to protect them turn those same convoys into higher priority, easier to identify targets than undisguised trucks ever were. Every fix narrowed the problem it was supposed to solve and widened a different one instead. There isn't a version of this adaptation cycle where Russia gets to keep the benefit of hiding and the benefit of protecting at the same time. The two solutions actively work against each other, and every convoy commander now has to choose which weakness to accept. A fuel convoy painted to look like a milk delivery still needed an armed escort to survive the road it was driving. That escort is what told Ukraine exactly where to look. Every layer of disguise Russia has added since spring has come with its own tell. A fresh coat of paint, a suspiciously new license plate, a truck moving just slightly too carefully down a road, real milk trucks never bothered avoiding. If disguising a truck as something harmless only works until you have to protect it like something valuable, what does Russia actually have left to try? And how many more convoys have to burn before someone in Moscow admits there isn't a fourth option?